years. We go into summer, really. Some of you maybe have already gone on vacation. You already got it out of the way. You got it all planned out, or you're going to vacation. One of the things my family and I used to do on vacation, and you're going to be surprised by this, especially if you've ever sat right here in this section, but we used to do this. We used to go on vacation and we used to sing. You take a guitar or sometimes just something to play a beat with or something like that. My family is very musically gifted. Me, not even close. Like I play the radio and that's it. And I don't even play that very well. Okay, that's all I have. But we used to sing these songs. And I love the feel and I love how we introduced it kind of in this way. I love that Pastor Joe did that. It felt like I was around a campfire. And I was around a campfire and I was singing these songs. And there's some family songs as we went on vacation that I just thought were great. We went on this journey. We got away from the world, away from technology, away from all those things. And then we got to sing as a family and center our minds around whatever the song was. Sometimes it's just some funny song about bears dancing, right? Or maybe it's a more meaningful song. Maybe it's a hymn or something like that. That's how my family would introduce it. And this journey, if you will, on vacation became a time almost of like self-discovery. And maybe that's what some of your vacations are designed to be. You're going away, you're journeying out to kind of find your story. And as we're going to take a vacation in Rome, this series is called The Summer in Rome, we're going to go out and kind of take a vacation with Paul. With Paul, the first century writer, as he's writing to Rome, he wants to visit them. He wants to vacation, if you will, to journey to them. Now, oftentimes, like I said, when we take a vacation, what do? We try to get away from everybody and maybe go to a place where we can learn about ourselves, where we can learn our story, where we can learn our purpose, where we can find ourselves, if you will. In fact, that's one of the reasons my wife and I want to go to Rome. See, my wife's Italian, right? Which means she makes amazing food, right? And it means a lot of other things. But my wife's family, we can trace her family tree, this is really cool, to a specific village in Italy. How cool is that? And so my wife and I have always said our dream vacation is we are going to find that village. And we're going to tell them, hey, this is a Bradanini. That's my wife's maiden name, Bradanini, very Italian. This is a Bradanini, and I'm expecting, what are they going to do? I'm expecting I don't have to pay for a hotel or ever a meal because they're going to bring me in and fatten me up on meatballs. I'm going to come back 50 pounds heavier from Rome. It's going to be great. But we think there's part of us that we think if we can journey to where her family story started, if you will, it's almost like we would kind of find ourselves or pick up some purpose, some meaning, some significance on this journey. Now, I just want to take that idea real quick, that idea of going on a journey to find your story, going on your journey to find meaning. This is not just a dream of my wife and I. This is a modern-day phenomenon. And we realized this just this week. My wife and I were watching TV, and maybe you've seen this very same commercial. We're watching TV, and as we're looking at the TV screen, a commercial pops on, and this lady is describing how she is a designer. And she describes the clothes that she designs are very purposeful, meaningful clothes. And she describes this coat, this jacket that actually turns into a two-person tent. Has anybody seen this? If you've seen this, don't raise your hand. Okay, so everybody's seen this, okay? Thank you for your involvement in the service. But I see this, and honestly, I think this is the silliest thing, right? This is the silliest thing I've ever seen. Why would I want a jacket to turn into a tent? I have a tent for that, right? I mean, I'm looking at this, and this jacket is just this long, frumpy, looks cumbersome, just kind of jacket. And I think to myself, why wear this frumpy jacket tent when I could just wear a fitted jacket and put my tent in my backpack? Like, I don't understand the purpose behind this. So my wife, as brilliant as she is, just kind of speaks into my ignorance, and she says, babe, you don't understand culture. I'm like, wow, okay, fill me in. Right? She's working in student ministry, so she knows everything that's going on. She tells me, there's this new phenomenon, Paul. There's this new thing in culture. It's called wanderlust. Have you ever heard of that before? Wander. Now, maybe you're like, Paul, you're not saying the word right. Okay, wander. Like, I'm a wanderer. I wander round and round and round and round. Baby boomers laughed at that. All the millennials are like, why did he repeat himself over and over again? It's an old song, okay? But it's this idea of wander. They lust to wander. They desire to wander, to journey, to find their story, to journey out and to discover purpose. And that's why they need a jacket that turns into a tent, because they're just wandering around not knowing where they're going. Now, this is a big deal. I actually looked this up. There's a festival about this. And the slogan of the festival is this: find your north. Right? Find your north, the thing that sets your compass. Find your north. Now, I want to unpack that idea real quick. And let's ask ourselves, as followers of Jesus Christ, are we wanderers? Are we just journeying around looking for a purpose, hoping to find that one village, to find where our story starts, or to find a piece of our story, to find significance? Are we aimlessly going about looking for a destination to give us meaning? I actually think our story is much different than that, almost opposite of that. I'd rather say we are not wanderers, rather, no, we are messengers. We don't journey to find purpose. Rather, we journey because of purpose. Purpose is not something that we find. Really, purpose is something that has found us. And now we journey out of that purpose. God has changed our story, and now we go out and we journey. We do not journey to find our story. Rather, our story has changed, and now we journey. And this is the life of Paul. This is why Paul goes to Rome. This is why he would take a visit. This is why he wanted to see them, because something happened to him. His story changed, and now his whole life, every step from that moment of change, is now purposely put into place. Every step, he is not just wandering, rather he is intentionally set on a journey to change everyone's story. I want you to take the pen out of the seat back in front of you. I want you to find that spot in your bulletin there. There's a little insert. On that insert, you're going to see Bible passages on the front. On the inside, you're going to see life group questions, further study questions. Some of our life groups have taken a break in the summer. So really, these questions are designed for group discussion, but also for personal study. So you can take that with you. You can dive in deeper into the message. On the back side there's room for notes, and you can see a spot in the middle called Big Idea. If you're only going to take one bit of note, this is what I want you to take. This is the big idea from this message as we see the life of Paul as he's going to journey to Rome. It's this: your story changes everyone's story. Your story changes everyone's story. And what we're going to look at this morning is to see how this is Paul's mindset. And because this is Paul's mindset, we follow in his footsteps. That really we're not wanderers, rather we are messengers. We're not journeying to find our story, rather our story has changed, and now we journey to see other stories change. So I invite you to open up your Bibles or to follow along in your bulletin. We're going to be in Romans chapter 1, starting with verse 1. Now, if you don't have a Bible, we do use our Bibles every time we come together. You're going to see it on stage every time. Every time somebody's coming up in here and speaking. Here's why we do this. We have one main core value, or we have 5 core values, but our number one value is God speaks before we speak. And that means we're a very book-dependent people. Everything we do is flavored by this book right here. Not by our invention, imagination, or opinion. Rather, it's this book right here. And if you don't have one of these, we will gladly give you one for free. You can actually take one if you want. On the back shelf right there in the middle, or at the back of our lobby here, you can take, or auditorium, I'm sorry, you can take one. If you don't have one, or if you don't want to get up in the middle of the service, come see me at the Information Center. I'll gladly give you a Bible for free. But let's open it up. Let's start at Romans chapter 1. Starting with verse 1. And let's look first at Paul. Paul's story. Did Paul's story change? Did he journey to find his story? Or did really, instead of him finding north, did north find him? Did his story change and then lead him into this journey? Let's unpack what that looks like, and we'll learn how we should also change other stories, and we will learn how we can have our story changed. So let's start with Romans chapter 1, starting with verse 1. It says this: Paul, a servant of Christ Jesus, called to be an apostle, set apart for the gospel of God. Take that pen. that you wrote down the big idea with, I want you to just underline, circle some of these words. Put a star by, emoji, whatever it is. However you take notes. I want you to circle 2 words, called and set apart. Paul says, this is who I am. This is my story. I am called to be an apostle. I am set apart for the gospel of God. Now, this is the crazy part of Paul's thinking about his story. That idea of set apart, that idea that I was placed to the side, I was taken out of a group and placed over here for a specific purpose. That word right there is not a word we just casually read over. No, to be set apart goes all the way back to the Old Testament. All the books written before Jesus Christ, how instruments of worship, whether it be a lampstand or bread or a table or an instrument or a garment, these things were called to be set apart. The term used in the Old Testament is they're holy. They're holy. They're set apart, taken out of a group, placed over here to say, this is going to be used by God. Paul is saying, this is what's happened to me. God has set me apart. Now, if we look at Paul's further writings to the church at Galatia, he says, when was he set apart? From his mother's womb. From the very beginning, before he ever uttered one word, ever said mommy or daddy, God set him apart. Now, you're going to see as we run through this, run through the book of Romans, even walk through the passage today, you're not an accident. You're not an inconvenience. There's no such thing as an unplanned pregnancy to God. You are divinely, intentionally, specifically, intimately made, woven together, and God is the one who is authoring your story. Just like with Paul, he's authoring your story. Even from the very beginning, from your mother's womb, God was writing your story. But the story invaded Paul's life in a specific time. That second word where it says called. I'm called to be an apostle. Now, Paul uses this term, probably what he's identifying with is actually his Damascus Road experience. So yeah, he was set apart from his mother's womb. But that doesn't mean he was always a Christian. That doesn't mean he was always following Jesus. In fact, he was doing the exact opposite. Paul was a very learned Hebrew. He was of one of the great tribes of Benjamin. I mean, he was an elite of the elite. He knew the law. He religiously, with zeal, he said, followed the law. Every single piece Paul did perfectly. Paul gets to his time of career, and you know what career he chooses? His job is to extinguish the blasphemers. His job is to kill the church. Because as a devout, zealous Jew, he sees these Jews start to worship a man named Jesus. And they even make the crazy claim that this man was God. That's blasphemy. That's blasphemy. That's against the very center of their confessional faith in the Old Testament. That God is one. God is not man. God is above us, transcendent, holy, perfect, righteous. And so Paul sees these people start to speak about Jesus. He says, we've got to shut these people up. And Paul doesn't say, okay, let's enter into a debate. Let's be delegates about this. Let's be diplomatic about this. Let's argue and have counterpoints. You know what Paul says? Let's kill him. Let's kill him. I mean, basically, Paul in the first century is like Jewish ISIS. Like he wouldn't be able to fly. He would be on a terror watch list in a Christian nation. This was one bad dude. The first martyr of the church, Stephen, that we know about, Paul was right there watching everything happen, condoning everything that happened, approving everything that happened. He was probably the author of that situation. He was probably the organizer that made that event happen. And it says when Paul was on the road to Damascus in Acts chapter 9 that he was seeking to destroy the church. But something happened. His story collided with God's story. This man who had been set apart from his mother's womb, that God had a specific plan, now the author, the transcendent holy author, the heavenly author, takes the pen and thrusts it into history, and he meets Paul on that road. And Jesus calls out to him and says, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? That's Paul's name before he became a Christian, a follower of Jesus Christ. His name was Saul. And Jesus Christ, in an audible voice, stops him, knocks him off his mode of transportation at the time, blinds him, speaks audibly to him, and Saul has no idea what's going on. He says, "Who are you?" He says, "I am Jesus Christ you are persecuting." And all of a sudden, his story changes. All of a sudden, the character changes. And this man who was trying to kill the church, persecute the church, now becomes one of the primary builders of the church, the one who would author a majority of the New Testament letters. This guy used to be basically a terrorist, now becomes a pillar of the church. And what started in Acts chapter 9, verse 1, as one who would persecute the church, turns and changes to Acts chapter 9, verse 20, and it says he goes into the synagogue and says, Jesus Christ is the Son of God. Paul's story has changed. He wasn't looking for north. He wasn't journeying out to find this purpose. Purpose found him. North found him, and it changed his compass. It changed his story. And now what does he want to do? Now this drives him to change other stories. Look at verse 2. He said he's set apart for the gospel of God. And what is this story? He gives us a little hint. He's going to give us even more as we get further on in the letter, but he gives us a little glimpse. What is this God story that's invaded his story? It's a story about Jesus Christ. Verse 2, it says this, which he, being God, promised beforehand through the prophets in the scripture. This is the story that everybody's been waiting for. This isn't new. This isn't surprising, if you will. This is the first time they've heard of this. In fact, from page 1, really, they've been waiting for Jesus. Right at the fall of Adam, to the faith of Abraham, to the powerful message of Moses, to the godly reign of David, every single prophet after that, even the ones in exile, even the ones when they were in slaves to Babylon, to a foreign power, everybody has been talking that God's going to send a rescuer, that God's going to fix everything. They start calling this figure Messiah. Messiah, anointed one, the one set apart for God's purpose. They've been waiting for this story, and this story invades our story, invades history in Jesus Christ. Look what he says. Which he promised beforehand through the prophets in the Holy Scripture concerning his Son, who was descended from David according to the flesh and was declared to be the Son of God in power, according to the Spirit of holiness by the resurrection from the dead, Jesus Christ our Lord. Right there. Jesus enters into history. The story changer changes all of our stories, changes everybody's stories. The one they had waited for since the beginning of our existence as humanity. It was promised to Adam and Eve there would be one who would come, who would crush the head of the serpent, who would take away your sin, who would bring you back to the garden. The snake crusher has entered into history. And it's not like he has something against reptiles, right? That's symbolic of Satan, of sin, of rebellion. And Christ crushed our rebellious hearts. He crushed our sin by being crushed for us. He was crushed on the cross. But then it says he was declared in power by the resurrection, in power to be Lord, to be King, that he was conqueror. He wasn't conquered. Sure, that moment of crucifixion, that moment of bloody murder and of agony, sure, from the human vantage point, that looked like defeat. And to the disciples, what did they do? They retreated. They saw defeat and they retreated. But that wasn't the end of the story. Because later, what did Christ do? Sure, he was struck. Sure, he was bruised. He was beaten and he was wounded. But he rose again from the grave, and now he's king, and now he's Lord. And Paul says, this is the story that changed me. And now when I go out, when I walk the roads of Damascus or everywhere I go, this is the story I say. Look at how he continues on. Verse 5. Through him we have received apostleship, received grace and apostleship, to bring about the obedience of faith for the sake of his name among the nations. Now we have a job to do. Just like the song we sang, now we have a job, and it is a global job, that every nation would believe, would obey, and have faith. I love how he collides those two ideas together. See, I think oftentimes in American Christianity or just in the American language, faith is not a strong enough word to describe the commitment of a Christ follower. Because faith to us just sometimes means a wishful assent of truth. Like, we don't know what's going to happen, and so we say, I'm not sure what's going to happen, so I'm going to have faith. Okay, maybe that'll happen. Like, you pick the lottery numbers, and you do it by everybody's birth date. Right? You don't have enough kids for all the numbers, so you start adopting neighbor kids. And okay, well, when were you born? Okay, I'm going to put that number, right? And you put the ticket on the refrigerator, you set it there, and okay, I'm going to have faith, and I'm going to win. Okay, that is not biblical faith, not even close. It's not wishful thinking. It's not pull the lever, wait for 777 to pop up. Now, I know you don't know what that is because you're church people, okay, but that's a slot machine in Vegas. You're like, Pastor Paul's a sinner, okay? So yeah, they pull the thing and you have faith. Okay, I'm going to win, I'm going to win, I'm going to win, I'm going to win. That's not what we do when we look at the cross. Faith is probably better translated as trust. It's trust. It's like you stepping out on a bridge where there's a cliff here, and there's a chasm before you. And if you slipped off, you would die. It's too high. Faith is not saying, hey, I think that's sturdy enough. I'm going to sit over here with my lottery receipt attached to the refrigerator, and I'm just going to be right here. No, faith is an act. It's an act of trust, and it steps out and says, this is going to hold my weight. I'm going to thrust my entire life and my existence, all my following, my family, my money, everything. I'm going to step out. And I think that's firm ground. That's what biblical faith is. And that's why Paul could tie these terms together as faith and obedience, because faith leads to following. Believing that Jesus died and rose again is not being a Christian. Trusting in Jesus Christ, death and resurrection as the only means to traverse the chasm between you and God. To walk to him. Faith means following. Faith means stepping out, and Paul is saying, I want to present the gospel not so you know some facts, so you can cite it or put it in a footnote of your life. No, rather, I think this story will change your life. It'll give you a new north. You will find new purpose. And this is why Paul is so eager to get to Rome. So eager to get out there. Because his whole life has changed. And now he has this story that could change everybody's story. And he says, I got to get to you guys. Look at his drive. Look at the eagerness, right? Let's keep reading. I want you to jump down to verse 8. Look at the drive that's in Paul and see if this characterizes your passion for Christ and your passion for the nations. Just kind of run through a checklist. If you're a follower of Jesus Christ, see if this is you. And I'll do the same. Is this me? Right, let's look at verse 8. Paul says this to the Romans. I got to get out there. I got to get to you guys. Look what he says. First, I thank my God through Jesus Christ for all of you, because your faith is proclaimed in all the world. Now, this is kind of weird. Let's just take a pause for a moment here. Paul is saying they're already Christians. So, Paul, why do you want to go to them? I mean, if they already believe, why go in and tell the story? Right? They already have faith. Why do you need to go then? You're saying that you pray to God, you give thanks. Hey, your faith is being heard throughout the world. Then why go? Again, because Paul has a larger view of what faith is. Faith is not a moment. It's not a decision only. Sure, it starts in a moment, and we're going to look at that when we get to Romans chapter 4. It can start in a moment. A decision, a time where you prayed and you surrendered your life to Jesus Christ, where you said, I believe that he died and rose again, I'm making you Lord. That could happen in a service, that can happen with your parents, that can happen with your friend who invited you to church. That moment can happen. Oftentimes for Christians, it happens in a prayer. But is that the sum total of faith? No, Paul knows that. Paul would even write to Timothy, a fellow minister, somebody he was working along with. He says, I planted this church in Thessalonica. And all these people believed, and it was great. They heard the message of Jesus Christ. They said, this is going to change my story. This story changes everything about my life. They had faith. They made that moment decision. But then Paul says, Timothy, because he goes away, and he tells Timothy, I want you to see if they're still following. Because if their faith does not lead to following, then my work was in vain. That's what he says in 1 Thessalonians. I got to see them go from start to finish. And my job as a minister, as a pastor, Paul would say, his job as an apostle is not to get you to a moment, but get you all the way to your deathbed. That your faith would cross the finish line. It's not about checking a box or saying a prayer. Those are good things. But it's about that faith following and that faith finishing. This is why Paul wants to go. This is why he's going to tell the story again to them and over and over and over to them so they live in a manner worthy of Jesus Christ. So he says, I pray for you. Jump down again, verse 9. I pray for you, for God is my witness, whom I am served with my spirit in the gospel of his Son. Look what he says, without ceasing. Underline that word. Without ceasing. I constantly do this. Paul doesn't have a fidget spinner to waste his time or Facebook and social media. What does he do? He prays. It says constantly he finds himself praying. And who's he praying for? For Rome. I got to get there. Now, he's not like me. He's not thinking, let's go to a village and have them fatten us up. That's not why he wants to go to Rome. He says, man, I want to be with you guys. I want to be there. Look how he describes it. He says, without ceasing, I make mention of you, always in my prayers, asking that somehow, by God's will, I may now at least succeed in coming to you. Guys, I want to be there. Don't you love that? That eagerness he has? God, I got to be there. He takes it even further. Look at verse 11. For I long to see you, that I may impart to you a spiritual gift to strengthen you. That is, that we may be mutually encouraged by each other's faith, both yours and mine. I do not want you to become unaware, brothers, that I have often intended to come to you, but thus far I have been prevented, in order that I may reap some harvest among you, as well as among the rest of the Gentiles. What is Paul saying there? I want to do this, and I've tried to do this. I've tried with every intention to make this happen, but I've been prevented so far. I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this. But then he's going to take want and turn it into need. This is not only Paul's desire. I mean, he is eager, you can tell. But look at the next word he uses. Take that pen again. You're going to circle a word. You're going to do some work here in church. Look what he says in verse 14. I am under, circle this word, obligation, both to Greeks and to barbarians, to both the wise and to the foolish. For I'm eager to preach the gospel to you also who are in Rome. I need to do this. Wow. Now, there's a big difference between want and need, right? I mean, you know this. I've got a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, and if you've ever had kids or you know this or been around little ones, been an uncle or an aunt, kids, we got to teach them this vocabulary, right? Daddy, I need candy. No, you don't need candy. You need water and clothes and maybe some food when the game's over, right? But you're good now. We can't let them confuse this. Because need means something entirely different. I'll give you an example of my life. I'll stop picking on my kids, okay? I need, and this is true, don't laugh at me, all right? Can we all just commit right now that we're not going to laugh at Pastor Paul? Okay, I need to see the premiere of the new Star Wars in December. You liars in church, you said you would not. I do, it's true. I need to see it. Like, do I want to see it? Sure, I want to see it. No, but I need to see it. Why? Because I'm afraid of the dangerous consequences that could happen to our universe if I don't go to that show. I'm serious, because I've been to everyone so far, and nothing bad has happened, right? A Crandall going to a Star Wars premiere is like the cosmological constant of gravity. And if we tamper with that, the whole fabric of time and space can unravel. And I don't want that on you, so I will make sure it happens for you. I'll take my kids out of school. If it's a Sunday, I'm not coming. Just kidding. Just kidding. Now, I say that jokingly, but look at the drive. of Paul. Paul's not saying, oh yeah, I want to do this, guys. I'm eager to this. He says, I am obligated to this. I need to do this. He would even describe to the Corinthian church, he would say this, if I don't preach the gospel, he says, woe is me. Now, we don't use that term. It sounds very old English. Well, what is Paul saying there? He says, judgment would fall on me. That's what a woe is. Woe is me. Judgment fall on me if I don't go, if I don't tell people about Jesus. Just stop for a second right there. Imagine if that described your faith. You know what one of the dreams that I have for this church? One of the dreams is we would never recruit. We would only make room. We would never recruit. We would only make room. Here's what I mean by that. We wouldn't recruit. We wouldn't have to beg, hey, we need people in children's ministry to teach kids the word. Right? We need somebody to be a father figure to a 13-year-old boy over here in our student ministry. Right? We need a young woman who has a good sense of self-esteem. Who can tell these teenage girls who've never met their father what true value of a woman is. Right? I would dream that our church, we would never have to recruit. We would just have to make room. We'd have so many eager and ambitious people say, I got to get in there. All right, Pastor, blah, 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 you're talking, we're singing, I think that's cool, but I need to move. Like, I'm eager. I am sitting in the seat, and it's way too comfortable because I got to get out there. I got to do something. My story has changed, and I got to change other people's story. I got to get out there. That boy is not going to have that story anymore because I'm going to change it. That girl is not going to have that story anymore because I'm going to change it. Those kids are not going to have the story that they have anymore because North found me. Purpose found me, and I want to see their lives change. And there's nothing worth the investment of my life than to see others' stories change. I need to do this. Not Pastor Paul, I'm interested in evaluating your ministry to see if it's worthy of my time. Rather, I need to get in there. Now, just think of the power of a church that didn't recruit, but just made room for its people. Made room and say, hey, there's ministry adventures, there's ministry frontiers we have never even seen before. We need some Lewis and Clark kind of people who could say, there's a frontier land out there. I don't know what's out there, but I'll map it out. I'll find it out. I'll figure it out, but I need to go because I can't sit. I need to serve. Wow. That's Paul's heart. That is Paul's heart. Because his story has changed, he must change the stories of those around him. Now, what has changed in the story? And we're going to unpack this in Romans 1 through 4. This is going to be the main topic of everything that we do. But look at the last two verses. Let me tell you why Paul is so eager. What happened to him? Sure, he was knocked off his donkey. He was blinded. An audible voice spoke to him. But what changed in the story? What really changes the story? Is it a new plot set or a twist? Is it a changing of the scenery? Is it changing of the setting? Is it the introduction of a new character? No. It's more monumental and pivotal than that. It's the redemption of a character. And that character is you. Is you. God has come in and he has changed you. He is called, now don't get mad at me, the villain, a hero. He has changed your story. We were the bad guys. We were Darth Vader in episode 5. We cut off the hand of Luke Skywalker. And if you haven't seen the movie, it's been out for 40 years, okay? It's not my fault. Join America. Right, but we were the villains. I was the villain. But the story has changed, and now in episode 6, Darth Vader takes the Emperor, throws him over the bridge, and saves the day and brings balance to the Force. I know, your pastors are nerd, okay? You could tell all your friends that. That's cool. I'm fine with that. But this is what Paul is saying happened. My story has been changed. The pen has come down from heaven. North found me. Purpose found me. And now he calls the villain hero. Look at this. Look at the last two verses. This is the main thrust pretty much of the whole book of Romans is this. God has done something to you. Look at verse 16. For I am not ashamed of the gospel. That means the good news, the good story. And it's the story of Jesus Christ's death and resurrection. I'm not ashamed of it. For it is the power of God, right there. It is the power of God. The author has taken the pen in his hand and he's put it to the page. And it is powerful. Paul would say later on in his letters, when he preached and it came with power. Paul wasn't just eloquent. Paul wasn't just had loud volume with the microphone. No, when he spoke a story that changed everybody's story, and it came with power. It was the very work and words of God. God spoke when Paul told this story. For it is the power of God for salvation. Now this is our part. Salvation for character redemption, for you to be called villain to hero, for salvation to everyone who what? Believes. Everyone who has faith, everybody who trusts in Christ. Your story changes in a moment. For the Jew first and also for the Greek. For in it the righteousness of God is revealed. Righteousness is coming down from heaven. That's what that word means, revealed. It's used in verse 18. It says the wrath of God is revealed. The idea is this is God's activity. God's righteousness is coming from heaven down on us. But it's about us because his righteousness is raining on us. And it changes us. It converts us, saves us, it redeems us. It calls the villain, a hero. Now stop right there. Isn't that a story of corruption? You can't call the villain, the hero. You can't stop at episode 5 with Luke with no hand. Well, that would be like this. Luke with no hand. You can't stop at episode 5 and say Darth Vader is the hero. You can't do that. That's wrong. In the Old Testament, a judge, by the book of Exodus and the book of 1 Kings, it's told a judge must judge according to the facts. So if they're guilty, what must he call them? Guilty. You can't just make up a verdict. So how is it the God of the universe sees a villain with a villainous rap sheet, villainous acts, all of his crimes, and say, oh, innocent. In fact, righteous. Isn't that a story of corruption? The author has really ripped out the first pages and written in a story and spilled the ink on the pages and violated the rules of fiction. You can't do that. How is it that God's righteousness can change our status? It's because he doesn't look at you in the courtroom. The judge stares at the Son and then at you. He stares at Jesus Christ and then at you. He looks at the Son and says, you're guilty for my sin. He looks at Jesus Christ and he says, Christ, my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased, you're guilty of all of Paul Crandall's sin. And then he looks at me and he says, Paul, you are righteous because all of the obedience of my Son. That's how the story changes. Justice was not perverted. Justice was not distorted. Justice was not corrupted. Rather, justice was mercifully given, graciously given, because there was a beautiful exchange. That God the Father looked at the Son and said, guilty, even though all the guilt was right here. And now he looks at me, and I'm still a villain. I'm still in episode 5, not episode 6. I haven't done anything yet. I haven't acted good yet. I've done no righteousness. Paul would say in Galatians, it is an alien righteousness. This righteousness comes from heaven, and just like the rain, I didn't bring water on myself. It fell from heaven, and this is exactly what happened. North fell on us. Purpose fell on us. The story changed. The pen came down. It's not that we rewrote the story. Rather, our story was changed by the author, and he now says, villain, no, hero, because of Jesus Christ. That is what changes our story. And Paul says, I got to tell people this. Why? Because their stories, the world's stories, the nation's stories, your story, those kids' story, will only find a happy ending in Jesus Christ. Their stories will only find a happy ending in Jesus Christ. Now, I want to do something. I want to give you a challenge. You ready for this? I know you're like, Pastor Paul, you already told me to be on time for service. Now you're going to give me something else? Take out your phone. Everybody, let's do this together. As a congregation, we're going to jump in to the 21st century, okay? I want you to take out your phone. Everybody got their phone out? Wave it in the air, especially if you got a new iPhone 7 or something like that. I want to, okay, deacons, grab all the 7s. Pastor Paul needs a new phone. Just kidding. Right? This is like the iPhone 1.5, okay? We're going to do something here. I want you to let your story change everybody else's story. So you got your phone. You can put it down now. This is what you're going to do. I'm going to give you an example. Okay, I want to give our church a challenge for today. Not this week, today. Okay, on Facebook. Now, my wife showed me how to do this. Uh-oh. Honey, please make your way to the stage. I don't know what I'm doing here. You're laughing, but oh, there it was. I saw it. Oh, perfect. Okay. Oh, wait, you got to flip the camera. Oh, that's not the button. Jeez, Paul. We're going to get here, guys. We're going to get here. You should have tested this out. Okay, church, everybody say hi. Hi. Okay, this is the challenge. This is what I want you to do. I want you to take 1 minute, just 1 minute today, not Monday, 1 minute today. And I want you to record your story. All I want you to do is say how faith in Jesus Christ has changed you. I'm going to give you an example right here. And then I'm going to make the internet community your accountability. Because I'm going to tell them that you're going to do this. You ready? So we're going to Facebook Live. You ready? Ready? Everybody ready? Get in character. Ladies, touch up the makeup. Fellas, hide behind your wives. Okay? We don't want to see your faces. Okay, we're going to do this. Everybody ready? Okay, I'm going to show you what I want you to do. Okay, ready? Okay, we're gonna. This is fun because I've never done this before. This is the first time. Is anybody excited? Okay, you're like, Pastor Paul, you're a nerd. Okay, here we go. We're recording. Choose to send or share. No, I don't want to take a picture. No, I don't need help. Okay, let's be honest. Oh yeah, it's still on me. Okay. Oh, I think I'm live right now. Oh, go live. Okay, you have to hit the go live button. Okay. Oh, 3, 2, 1. You ready, guys? Here we go. Hey there, internet family. This is my church family. Church family, say hi. Ah, there you go. Woo. Okay, they're over there. All right, very nice. I want to tell you my story. This is how God has changed my story. When I was a kid, I was angry with God. I was mad at God because God gave me bad gifts. That's what I felt like. I was poor. I had learning disabilities. I had struggled in school. I just had a hard time growing up. And then when I was 12 years old, my story took the worst turn because my dad passed away. And it was like he was the center of my story. He was the hero. He was the one I wanted to be like. He was the one I wanted to be around. And to lose him, I felt like I lost everything. And I started going to church, and I started hearing about Jesus, and I started hearing a new story. And I'll tell you what, when somebody told me the gift that God gave me in Jesus Christ, I looked at my entire life and said, no, God is not the giver of bad gifts, but God is the giver of good gifts. And he gave the gift of his son, Jesus Christ, and I desperately needed that forgiveness. And God provided that forgiveness in the Son. And this wasn't forgiveness that was automatic. This wasn't forgiveness that was just going to happen. It was forgiveness that needed to be accepted. And I accepted that in faith. And I've been following Jesus Christ from that day. And I'll tell you, my story has totally changed. And all these people right here are going to tell you their story today. So I want you to look forward to this. And if you have any questions about how your story can change, I would love for you to message me, comment, or whatever, and we'll talk about how God can change your story too. Thank you. Now I want us to stop for a moment. This is not a challenge for Monday. It's not a challenge for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It's a challenge for today. I think it's time for Jesus to get something out of your Facebook. Just think, church, for a moment. There are so many people around you, and their stories will not have a happy ending apart from Jesus Christ. Their stories will not end well. And God has changed your story. You are not a wanderer. You're not aimlessly navigating through life, looking for purpose and direction. But purpose and direction has found you, has changed your story. And now God wants you to change stories of those around you. Take this challenge on. Let's flood. Let's just flood. Let's break Facebook, right? I don't think that's possible, but let's flood it with stories. Tag a friend, put somebody in there.